I need to tell someone this before I completely lose my mind. My name is Mark, and 3 months ago, my wife Sarah and our 5-year-old son Leo moved into what we thought was our forever home. It's a nice, quiet ranch-style house in a suburb just outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was a steal, half the price of the other houses in the area. When we first did the walkthrough with the realtor, I asked a very specific question. Does the house have a basement? See, I'm from the Midwest. I like having a spot for a workshop. The realtor shook her head and said, no, this house is built on a slab. Just solid concrete under the floors. No basement, no crawl space. It's as solid as it gets. I was a little disappointed, but Sarah loved the natural light in the big backyard for Leo, so we signed the papers. For the first month, everything was perfect. We spent our weekends painting walls and picking out furniture. Leo seemed happy too. He's a quiet kid, very imaginative. He has always had invisible friends, so when he started talking to someone in his room, we didn't think twice about it. It started on a Tuesday night. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I heard Leo's voice coming from the hallway. He wasn't playing with his cars or watching cartoons. He was whispering. "No, Caleb, not tonight. Daddy says it's bedtime." I walked over to his doorway and leaned in. "Hey, buddy, who are you talking to?" Leo looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "I'm talking to my brother, Daddy. He's hungry." I laughed a little and knelt down next to him. "Your brother? You don't have a brother, Leo. Maybe you mean a friend from school?" Leo shook his head very seriously. "No, my brother, Caleb. He lives in the basement." A cold chill ran down my spine, though I didn't know why yet. I forced a smile. "Leo, remember what the lady told us? This house doesn't have a basement. There's nothing but dirt and concrete under us." Leo didn't argue. He just pointed at the floor in the middle of the hallway, right outside his bedroom door. "Caleb says it's dark down there. He says he wants to come up." I told him it was just a dream and tucked him into bed. I went back to the living room and told Sarah. We both laughed about it. Kids have wild imaginations, right? We figured he probably heard a neighbor mention a basement and his brain did the rest. But that night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a crash. It was a rhythmic, hollow thud. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from directly beneath the solid concrete slab. The next morning, I checked the hallway. I pulled back the carpet, expecting to see a crack in the concrete or maybe a loose pipe, but there was nothing, just a flat, gray slab of solid cement. I even took a hammer and tapped on it. The sound was thud, thud, thud. It was dense. There was no hollow space underneath. There was no room for a person or even a rat to be living down there. I tried to tell myself I was tired. I told Sarah that the house was just settling, a common excuse for any weird noise in an old home. Sarah agreed, but she looked nervous. She had noticed that Leo wasn't eating his favorite cereal anymore. When she asked him why, he said, "I have to save some for Caleb. He hasn't eaten in a long time." That afternoon, I found Leo in the living room. He was drawing with his crayons. Usually he draws bright yellow suns and messy green trees, but this picture was different. He used only the black crayon. He had drawn a large rectangle, a box, and inside the box there were 2 small stick figures. One had a smiley face, the other had no face at all. "Who is that, Leo?" I asked, pointing to the faceless figure. "That's my twin," Leo said, without looking up. "The one who stayed behind." "Stayed behind where?" My voice was shaking. "In the dark place," he said. "He says it's cold. He says you and Mommy forgot him." I felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. We don't have another son. We never lost a child. Leo is an only child. I took the drawing away and told him to go wash up for dinner. I showed the picture to Sarah later that night. Her face went pale. "Mark," she whispered, "look at the bottom of the paper." I turned the page over.
in tiny, shaky handwriting, the kind of writing a 5-year-old shouldn't be capable of, was the single sentence, "Let me in." That was the night the smell started. It wasn't the smell of something dead. It was the smell of damp earth and old, stale air, the kind of smell you only find in a deep, underground cellar that hasn't been opened in 50 years. It was strongest in the hallway, right outside Leo's door. Around midnight, I was startled awake by Sarah shaking my shoulder. "Mark, listen," she hissed. I held my breath. From the hallway, I heard Leo's voice. He was laughing. It was a high-pitched, happy giggle. And then I heard another voice. It was deeper, raspy, like someone who hadn't used their vocal cords in years. "Again," the raspy voice said. "Slide it under, again." I grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and sprinted to the hall. I slammed the door open and shined the light on the floor. Leo was sitting there, pushing a small red toy car toward the wall. Except the car didn't hit the baseboard, and then it disappeared. It didn't go under the door, it went into the floor. It was like the solid concrete had turned into liquid for a split second. I ran over and grabbed Leo, pulling him back. "What are you doing? Where did the car go?" Leo looked at me, his eyes wide with wonder. "Caleb wanted to play, Daddy. Look, he gave me a present back." Leo opened his hand. In his palm was a small, rusted skeleton key. It was covered in wet, black mud.
I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that rusted key. It felt unnaturally cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. The mud on it had dried into a fine gray ash. I kept thinking about that toy car. I had seen it with my own eyes. It didn't roll away. It vanished into the floor like water soaking into sand. The next morning, while Sarah took Leo to the park to get him out of the house, I went to work. I wasn't looking for a basement anymore. I was looking for a lie. I went to the garage and started moving everything. I pushed aside the heavy metal workbench, the lawn mower, and the stacks of moving boxes we hadn't unpacked yet. Under a heavy pile of old carpets in the corner of the garage, I found it. It wasn't a door. It was a patch of concrete that looked slightly different from the rest. The color was a shade lighter, and the texture was smoother. In the center of this patch was a small circular hole, the size of a keyhole. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the skeleton key. I knelt down, the smell of damp earth hitting me again, stronger than ever. I inserted the key into the hole. It fit perfectly. I turned it. Creak. A heavy mechanical sound echoed through the garage. A square section of the floor about 3 feet wide began to sink. It lowered slowly, revealing a narrow vertical shaft with a rusted metal ladder bolted to the side. I grabbed my flashlight and started to climb down. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't a basement. It was a bunker, a small reinforced room buried deep beneath the house. When my feet hit the floor at the bottom, the air felt thick. I shined my light around the room. It was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were lined with old wooden shelves, but they were empty, except for one corner. In that corner, there was a small twin-sized bed. The blankets were tattered and covered in dust, but they were tucked in neatly. Next to the bed was a pile of toys, old wooden blocks, a tattered teddy bear with one eye missing, and a small bright red toy car. I picked up the car. It was the exact one I had bought for Leo last week. It was still warm, as if a child had just been holding it. I shined my light on the wall above the bed. There were hundreds of tally marks scratched in the concrete, as if someone had been counting the days. And next to the marks, written in that same shaky, childish handwriting, was a name. Caleb. I felt a wave of nausea. I needed to get out of there. I turned to the ladder, but then I stopped. On the floor, near the edge of the bed, there was an old leather-bound diary. I opened it to the first page. It wasn't a diary. It was a medical log. It belonged to the man who lived here before us, a doctor named Dr. Aris. The first entry was dated 40 years ago. The experiment is progressing. Subject B is showing remarkable resilience to the isolation. Subject A, the twin, remains upstairs in the light. Subject B must remain in the dark. We must see if the bond between twins can bridge the gap between two different worlds. If one is happy, does the other feel it? If one is hungry, does the other starve? I dropped the book. Subject B, the twin in the dark. Suddenly, the heavy concrete hatch above me slammed shut. The garage light disappeared. I was in total, absolute darkness. And then I heard it. A soft, wet breathing coming from the bed behind me. "Daddy," a voice whispered. It sounded like Leo, but it was wrong. It was hollow. "Did you bring more toys?"
I scrambled backward, my hands hitting the cold concrete wall. I fumbled with my flashlight, clicking the button frantically until the beam of light cut through the dark. The bed was empty. There was no boy. There was no subject B. But the indentation on the pillow was still fresh. The air still smelled like damp earth. I didn't wait to see more. I jumped for the metal ladder and climbed as fast as I could. I hammered my fists against the concrete hatch, screaming for help. Then I heard the lock turn. The hatch opened. I pushed it up and crawled onto the garage floor, gasping for air. I expected to see Sarah, but the garage was empty. The door to the kitchen was wide open. "Sarah! Leo!" I yelled. No answer. I ran into the house. Everything looked normal, but the silence was heavy. I ran to the hallway, to that spot on the floor where Leo always sat. The carpet had been ripped up. There was a hole in the concrete, not a mechanical hatch like the one in the garage, but a jagged, dark hole, as if someone had smashed through it with a sledgehammer from underneath. I heard a sound from the backyard. I ran to the glass sliding door. Sarah was standing near the oak tree at the edge of the woods. She was holding Leo's hand. They were both looking into the dark trees. "Sarah, thank God," I breathed, running towards them. "We have to leave. Now, this house, there's something under it. There was a doctor, an experiment." Sarah didn't turn around. She just kept staring into the woods. "He's happy now, Mark," she said. Her voice sounded flat, like she was in a trance. Who? Who is happy?" I grabbed her shoulder and turned her towards me. Sarah's eyes were bloodshot. She looked exhausted, but it was Leo who made my heart stop. Leo was smiling. It was the widest, most terrifying smile I had ever seen on a child. He was holding a small red toy car in his left hand, and in his right hand he was holding a human finger, grey, shriveled, and very, very old. "Caleb is out, Leo," Leo whispered. "He said it was my turn to go into the dark, but I told him we could share." "Where is Caleb, Leo?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Leo pointed to the woods. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged. It looked like Leo. It wore the same blue shirt. It had the same messy blonde hair. But when it stepped into the light, I saw its face. It had no eyes, just smooth, pale skin where the sockets should have been. It tilted its head, mimicking Leo's exact movements. "We are a family again," the thing said. It was the raspy voice from the hallway. I grabbed Sarah and Leo and ran. I didn't grab our clothes. I didn't grab my wallet. I just threw them into the car and drove. I didn't stop until we reached a motel 3 towns away. For the first 48 hours, we lived in a state of total shock. Sarah wouldn't eat. She just sat on the edge of the motel bed, watching the door. I stayed awake with a heavy lamp in my hand, watching the floorboards. Every time a car drove by or a heater clicked on, I jumped. I kept expecting to see that faceless boy standing in the corner of the room, but he never showed up. I never went back to that house in Ohio. I handled everything over the phone. I hired a specialized crew to go in, pack our belongings, and deliver them to a storage unit. I told them to leave the garage alone. I told them not to look under the carpets. They probably thought I was crazy, but I didn't care. I sold the house for half of what it was worth to a developer who planned to tear it down. I hope they bring a bulldozer. I hope they fill that hole with so much concrete that nothing can ever crawl out of it again. 6 months later, we tried to find our peace. We moved to a small town in Oregon, surrounded by pine trees and fresh air. I made sure of one thing. Our new home was built on a raised foundation. There is no concrete slab. There is no basement. If you go into the crawl space, you can see the grass growing and the sunlight filtering through the vents.
For a while, it worked. Sarah started going to therapy. Leo joined a local soccer team. The nightmare of Ohio felt like a distant bad dream. We don't talk about Caleb anymore. We don't talk about the doctor or the experiment. We've learned to live in the light. Leo is growing up fast. He's a normal, happy kid. He plays video games and complains about his homework. But sometimes, on very quiet nights, I find him standing in the middle of the hallway. He's not talking to anyone. He's not laughing. He's just listening. I'll walk up to him and put my hand on his shoulder. "Everything okay, pal?" I'll ask. He'll look up at me and smile, a normal, sweet smile. "Yeah, Daddy, just enjoying the quiet." But I know the truth. We escaped the house, but we can't escape the memory. Every time I hear a floorboard creak or the wind rattle a window, my heart skips a beat. I know there's nothing under us but dirt. I know we are safe. But the lesson I learnt is one I'll never forget. Some secrets aren't buried in the ground. They are buried in your mind. And as long as you remember the sound of the knocking, the basement is never truly gone.